Hey guys, it's Ollie, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in similar fashion to some other of my videos, I'll be doing a top 10 reasons why a pet toad might not be for you. I want to start this video off by saying that this is in no way saying that toads are bad pets. This is in no way saying that no one should keep toads. I'm not saying anything bad about keeping this animal. I got a lot of backlash in my 10 reasons not to get a pet snail video about people for some reason thinking that I'm completely against keeping them, and that is not the case. I like to make these con lists for every animal that I have experience with to kind of ensure that people know what they're getting into, so that way you're not going to get a pet that no one told you the cons about and end up being miserable with it. You know what I mean? Most of these are not cons for me. Most of them are not, and a lot of them probably won't be for you either. Putting that out there as well. This list is also for toads I have experience with, which would be American toads, Fowler toads, southern toads, that kind of thing. This could probably also apply to like other toads like cane toads, smooth toads, but I'm not saying for sure. This is just for the list I just gave you. So now that that little disclaimer is out of the way, let's go ahead and get right into the video with number one. So con number one is they have sensitive skin, like very sensitive skin. Amphibians in general, not just toads, they drink through their skin, they absorb everything through their skin. So since they absorb everything through their skin, you do have to be careful with what they come in contact with, which is why like if you clean their enclosure, it should only be with water kind of thing. You have to dechlorinate your water, all of that, to make sure that you're not going to get anything in there that can cause them to get sick, because they can very rapidly decline from taking in toxins through their skin. So that is probably the biggest one, is that they just are so sensitive, and that's with every amphibian, that is not just for toads. Alright, so going in with the first point is point number two, and that is that they are not really handleable. You can handle them. I recommend handling them with gloves though. I don't recommend holding them with your bare hands unless you've rinsed them off incredibly well. They're not only non-handleable for their sensitive skin, they're also they just get kind of stressed from it, especially toads that aren't as used to human interaction, and they will pee all over you. And you don't want your toad to turn into a little water gun. It's not a good time. So because of that, I wouldn't really recommend this animal to like a lot of children or people who really want to be very hands-on with their pets. Again, it can be done. Overall, not like a very handleable pet. Moving right along to maintenance. So maintenance isn't too bad. Just kind of like with every other herp, you have to kind of clean out the substrate once a month, especially for them because you don't want them sitting on gross old substrate. Now if you have a bioactive, obviously that's different. If you have an enclosure that has a cleanup crew like I do, it's still a little bit different. But yeah, if they are producing enough waste to where it's visible and you do have to get in there and clean it up, first of all, make sure you're spot cleaning, make sure you're changing their water every day, use dechlorinated water, you know, all that kind of stuff. Give them a mist because a lot of times they do need that. So that is pretty much my advice for maintenance. This can be a con just because a lot of people aren't as into that kind of thing. So a lot of people in the reptile and amphibian community are very used to cleaning enclosures and sometimes find it enjoyable, like myself. So for me, this wouldn't be a con, but for people who are just looking into these things and aren't realizing that maintenance is a huge part of keeping these animals, there you go. Another one that could be big for a lot of people is that toads eat live bugs. There's not really an alternative for this. There are some people out there that'll tell you can feed them dog food pellets of tongs or dead, like dried crickets. I don't recommend that at all. So for example, in captivity, their main sources of food would be things like crickets, dubia roaches, earthworms, things of that nature. But yeah, I think I'm more into the food they eat and stuff. In my toad care guides, I have two of them. I have a Fowler's toad and an American's toad care guide. They're pretty much the same, but anyway, there's not really like an alternative to it. So if you're not into that, toads wouldn't be for you. The other thing kind of goes in with that is how often they eat. So if you have like a dog or a cat, it probably sounds kind of normal to you. Speaking of cat, if you hear that in the background, my cat's playing, I'm sorry. But if you have like reptiles and stuff, they eat more often than like a snake would. So if you're more used to just having snakes or something, it could be a little bit weird. They do eat like anywhere between every day, every other day, every 3 days, depending on what they eat, and how much they eat, if that makes any sense. The food can be kind of expensive from how often they eat and what you choose to feed them. I don't have too much of an issue with this because I breed my own feeders, but if you don't, it can be a bit more expensive. Also, if you're younger and you still live with your parents, it could be a bit tricky to convince them that it's okay to have some form of cockroach in your house. So, cockroaches, as in like dubia roaches, not as in house cockroaches. They're very different. Very different. Kind of tying in with that, it's not another point, but I figured I'd mention it with it. You do have to give them calcium and vitamins and whatnot. Again, I go a little bit more into that in my care guides, but mentioning that now, yeah. Another con is they are really not bred a lot in captivity. It is very hard to get them to breed, and I've heard can be very dangerous for the female. So you really don't see a lot of American toads, Fowler toads, southern toads in captivity. That were born in captivity. Most of them are wild caught, which can be very damaging to the ecosystem. If you do get one, I do recommend getting them as toadlets when they first kind of emerge. First of all, you're not taking a breeding adult from the wild population, you are taking a baby which may not have been able to thrive outside anyway, so it is a bit better that way. But yeah, a huge con for me is that you can't really get them in captivity, bred in captivity. And if you do find somewhere, let me know, please. Please let me know. I've tried, I can't find anywhere. Please let me know. And be careful, because a lot of places can actually be scams. So be careful. If you find one, it arrives healthy, let me know. Kind of going along with that and tying into the next point, so it's kind of like a middle ground thing, is that they can also have parasites from outside. Some of them live with it their whole life and it's not too much of a problem. Sometimes they get very sick. So that's a problem, and a lot of them get it from being outside. The biggest reason that's a problem is there is some limited vet care. So at least where I live, there's not a lot of places that will take in a toad, like a southern toad or a Fowler's toad or an American toad. It is very difficult sometimes to find vets, and it definitely depends on your area. So I have one exotic vet in my town, which doesn't have a large variety, and there is one an hour and a half, I think, away from me, which also doesn't take toads. So it can be very hard to find vets and vet care. So when you do get a toad, try to find a vet so that you know that there is somewhere you can take it just in case, and you don't have to be searching for one when it gets sick. You know what I mean? Because toads can decline very quickly. So that would be my advice on that. But that is that other con, is it's very hard to find vet care sometimes. So point number 8 would be enclosure pests. It can be very frustrating to have enclosure pests. This can go from fruit flies, which aren't as common, and it happens, you know, it's an enclosure, it's gonna happen. You can get fungus mites, all kinds of stuff in your enclosure, and they're not great to have. So I actually got fungus mites recently in my toad enclosure. I had to take everything out, clean all of it, boil a lot of the stuff in the enclosure. They don't really hurt the toad as long as they're like in a smaller number, but they're annoying, and I think they're gross. But yeah, so I figured I'd mention enclosure pests because it can happen, and no one really warns you about it, so that's one of my cons. So number 9, okay, so toads can be really silly, and they can be kind of social with you. They're kind of curious about things. At least mine are, but sometimes they burrow. They can stay burrowed for kind of a long time, and for new keepers that can be very alarming. So if you're not used to animals that burrow, it can be alarming when you haven't seen your pet for a week. So I like to mention that sometimes they burrow. I would recommend, if they're a healthy toad, after a week or 2 of them being buried, you can go ahead and dig them up, but I wouldn't recommend digging them up before then unless they're sick or something. To go along with it, as in kind of the same point, they are mostly nocturnal, so if you are very much a morning person or day person, you may not see it as much as someone who works night shift or who's up during the night. This can depend on the toad, of course, but I figured I would put that in there because some people, that is a huge con. So I put that in there. And my last one is that there's really not a ton of information out there about toads and keeping them. So I learned almost everything I know from Facebook groups and from a couple of YouTube channels that had toad information. But other than that, there's not a ton, and there's not very many places you can go to look up what is wrong with your toad unless you are in these groups or know someone that can answer your questions. So that can be very frustrating, especially for someone like me that wants to know everything about the animal they're getting, like every little thing, or one little thing's different and I freak out about it. So that can be frustrating. Definitely try to find a group of people that can answer your questions and that are available to you. I always will try to answer any questions if you come to me. You can always DM me on Instagram, and I will always try to the best of my abilities to answer any questions you might have. So I hope to be somewhat of a support for you, but I also don't know all the answers. So also, if you don't have Instagram, I do try to get to all the comments. Sometimes YouTube is weird and will delete comments or make it to where I can't see them unless I'm on my laptop. So yeah, it's a whole thing. But anyway, that was my last point, is that there's not a ton of information, especially on their care. So it can be very frustrating. Alright guys, well that was pretty much it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. Again, this is in no way saying that no one should ever own a toad or they make bad pets. I love keeping toads and I think they make wonderful pets for the right people. But again, I just like to put it out there that it's not all great, and a lot of the information you're getting care from are from people who like keeping them. So I like to put out the cons. If you think of any more cons that you think people should know about, put them in the comments down below. And as always, give this video a like for the algorithm. Subscribe if you like this kind of content or really any animal content. Don't forget to follow my Instagram. The link will be down in the description below. I also do have an art Instagram link down below where you can check out my artwork and even commission me for a custom pet picture. I do have an August deal going on right now, and I will also have a winter Christmas deal when that time comes. So don't forget to check that out. Again, links in the description below. But anyway, that is enough rambling and self-promotions. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!